Hi, I'm Greg Munden. I'm the owner of a third-generation trucking business in British Columbia, and just wanted to present to you today a blog that I wrote regarding the driver shortage, specifically entitled 4 Reasons for the Truck Driver Shortage in British Columbia and some ideas on how to fix it. So if you work in the trucking industry or rely on trucks to move your freight in British Columbia, or Canada, or North America for that matter, you're no doubt living the effects of the truck driver shortage. If your job is to solve this problem for your organization, I would argue that you have one of the toughest jobs in the industry today. So what's created these circumstances, and what can be done to make your organization an employer of choice? The blog I've written is intended to examine these questions and some potential answers. So in terms of the numbers, the most comprehensive analysis of the truck driver shortage was conducted by the Conference Board of Canada back in 2016. At that time, an estimate of the potential driver shortage in Canada was that it could reach as high as 33,000 drivers by 2020, that's next year, and 48,000 by 2024. By all accounts, this number is proving out to be on the low side. It's currently estimated that 52% of the professional driving jobs in Canada do not have suitable candidates to fill them. In British Columbia, it was estimated that there's 1,700 professional driver vacancies in 2017. That information from the BC Labour Market Outlook. This number ballooned to almost 5,000 jobs in 2018. By 2027, across Canada, there will be an estimated 917,000 jobs to be filled, with only 438,000 young people entering the workforce. For the first time in history, there will be far more people exiting the workforce than entering to fill those positions. And really what's worse is that the trucking industry is attracting virtually no young workers. So it begs the question, why does the trucking industry face such a critical problem? Of course, almost all sectors are facing a labor shortage of some significance. Unfortunately, trucking is no longer attracting its fair share of incoming labor. I've got about 4 particular reasons that I want to discuss today with you, and the first one is poor public perception of the industry. At one time, professional drivers were respected for the jobs they did. All too often, this is no longer the case. As the labor crunch has become more widespread, certainly some trucking companies have lowered their hiring standards, and the industry has endured a tarnished reputation from some bad apples. That said, most trucking companies maintain high standards and operate according to the regulations and with safety as their #1 priority. Unfortunately, a poor performer in the industry brings a lot of negative attention. Trucks are often not popular among the rest of the motoring public to begin with. Over the years, truck weights and dimensions have increased. As congestion has increased in most major cities, trucks are increasingly viewed by the public as intimidating or causing delays. The public generally has less patience for the inconvenience of commercial truck traffic, with some municipalities even suggesting limiting truck access to their cities to nighttime hours, removing or severely limiting any truck parking opportunities, and on and on. Poor treatment of drivers by shippers and receivers alike have contributed to the perception that the driving profession is second-rate. As drivers endure long waiting times, often without compensation, substandard waiting conditions, drivers are often asked to wait off-site or banned from using washrooms, etc. Is it any wonder that we have a tough time attracting people? Number 2, we have an older than average workforce. Almost all sectors have an aging workforce on average. Unfortunately, the average age of the current professional truck driver is higher than virtually all other professions. Most recently, it's estimated that the average driver is 47 years old, almost 3 years older than the average in other sectors. Number 3, the trucking industry has non-competitive terms of employment. The trucking industry suffers from some difficult conditions of employment, including Number one, typical workday can be almost twice as long of a typical workday for other professions in Canada. Number two, there's virtually no overtime pay. Many professional drivers are paid on a productivity basis, so by the mile, percent of revenue, or some other means that does not pay them overtime. Number three, there's little flexibility. So unless you're really a regional carrier by nature, many long-distance trucking operations struggle to find any flexibility in their schedules. And really by nature, shipment must move from point A to point B and rely on finding a return load or a triangle route to make it economically feasible to do the run. So as a result, trucks and their drivers may be away from their home terminal for days or even weeks at a time. Accommodating a driver's request to make a family commitment, appointment, etc. can often be difficult at best. Number four, there's unpaid, unrecognized, and unappreciated time. Particularly in situations where drivers are paid based on productivity, they often face unpaid time due to things that are completely out of their control. Weather conditions, shipper-receiver hours of operation, delays, dispatching issues, and the list goes on. Worse, this time is often unrecognized and unappreciated by both the trucking company and the customer, and is commonly viewed as just part of the job. Back to main item number four, attracting and retaining workers. What are the obstacles? Well, first, competition. The fact is, as mentioned before, almost all sectors are looking for workers, and many offer more attractive terms of employment. This is not just wage, but flexibility, recognition of time, and other intangibles like pride in the job. Number two, safety. Some trucking sectors, particularly vocational sectors, like log hauling for instance, are considered dangerous jobs. The track record in these sectors for injuries and fatalities does not help the perception. Number three, graduated licensing program. In my province of British Columbia, graduated licensing program makes it very difficult to attract young workers to the trucking profession. I've got a whole other blog regarding the GLP that you can read about. Number four, lack of funds for training. The National Occupation Classification Code, which is a Canada-wide code that basically classifies all professions, all jobs in the industry, in all industries, categorizes the profession of truck driver wrongly as unskilled. And again, I've got a whole other blog on specifics around the National Occupation Classification Code. And finally, number five, we have inadequate training standards in the industry. It's commonly agreed by trucking companies that even after graduating an accredited Class 1 driver training program, most students are not qualified to actually enter the workforce as a driver. So it begs the question, what can be done to improve the situation regarding the driver shortage? Number one, respect for drivers, for the professionals that they are. Being a professional driver today is not a job everyone can do. It's done by people with a unique set of skills and a work ethic almost second to none. These drivers should be highly respected for the job they do by the trucking companies they work for, the customers that they serve, and the general public who, unknowingly, depend on these drivers for their daily lives. After all, as we like to say in the trucking industry, if you got it, it came by truck. Improving the level of respect for this profession is the only way we should expect to attract and retain people in the industry. It's fundamental. Number two, consider paying your drivers by the hour. Without a doubt, the trucking industry has a leadership role to play in solving this problem. Aside from showing and demanding great respect for your driving staff, trucking companies should consider moving away from productivity pay systems to hourly pay, or at least a combination of hourly pay to recognize what otherwise would be unrecognized time. Like most workers in the country, professional drivers more and more feel they deserve to be paid for all the time they put in. And why shouldn't they? Many trucking companies are continuing to use traditional pay methods, dollar per mile, percent of truck earnings, or whatever. While moving to an hourly pay system can feel like a dangerous change if you own a trucking company, doing this forces you to analyze the work that you have to make sure that you're being compensated fairly yourself for the truck. And it really has you ask the question of the customers and receivers that you provide service for as to whether they're providing you good service in return by getting your drivers in and out in a timely manner. Number 2, change the job to appeal to millennials. This generation of worker does not think or work the same as the traditional professional drivers in the industry. They place a high value on things like being respected for the work they do, work-life balance, that what they're doing is making a difference, and that they have a voice and what they have to say will be heard. And lastly, that they work in a progressive industry that adapts to change in technology. Number 4, reinvent your routes. Trucking companies may need to find ways to tailor their dispatches and routes to get drivers home more, to reduce the number of hours it takes to complete a day, etc. This may mean handing off loads or units at points along the route that drivers can complete and return home the same day or at the very least the next day. This could mean either basing drivers and units along the route. For larger trucking businesses, having terminals strategically located at exchange points that achieve the same goal and allow drivers to return home more frequently. Number 5, reassess your relationships. Shippers and receivers need to recognize and partner with trucking companies to help improve drivers' lives. This means treating drivers well when on their site and insisting that all of their staff do the same. Minimizing waiting time, having facilities for drivers to use if needed, and having reasonable expectations of delivery schedules. Simple things like adequate parking areas, washroom facilities, and access to coffee or water can go a long ways to improving a driver's perception of their job and the ability and desire to serve you well. Trucking companies may need to consider firing customers who simply don't treat their drivers with the respect that they deserve. At a minimum, customers who provide the best level of service to drivers to the company should be prioritized over customers who do not. And number 6, lobby for regulation changes to improve the trucking industry. Working with industry associations like the Canadian Trucking Alliance, the BC Trucking Association, the Interior Logging Association, the Ready Mix Concrete Association, and others are a great resource to get the ear of government at all levels to make the necessary regulatory changes that are needed to allow the industry to move forward to advance the driver shortage file. So number 1, modification of the graduated licensing program in BC to accommodate young people's training for a commercial license. Number 2, modification of the National Occupational Code, which we talked about earlier, to reclassify truck driver as a semi-skilled occupation. Number 3, increase the minimum standards to become a professional driver through the adoption of a mandatory entry-level training program, or MELT, which is really industry-specific training that meets the needs of industry to put people to work safely. And beyond that, industry and sector-specific training that takes it above and beyond for really specific vocational applications. Number 4, regulatory adoption of technologies like electronic logging devices or ELDs to help ensure drivers are treated fairly in terms of the overall hours of work and other events beyond their control, waiting time, delays, etc. You're welcome to read my blog on ELDs for more information on that. So in conclusion, the trucking industry has a great story to tell. It's one largely based on hardworking people doing a highly skilled job, safely picking up and delivering virtually everything used in your daily life. It's filled with a lot of rewarding and well-paying jobs provided by great, oftentimes small Canadian businesses. The driver shortage is an iceberg, Those that are close to the industry understand the underlying size of this issue, but those at a distance cannot foresee the potential for serious disruption to our provincial and national economy. Unfortunately, it may not be until the bread isn't on the shelf at the grocery store before the general public and our various levels of government become aware and involved in helping to solve this crisis. Raising the profile of the professional driver is an important first step in improving this situation, but it will take a concerted effort by many: trucking companies, shippers, receivers, industry associations, governments, and the general public. In 2008, we were reaching a similar crisis. However, it was masked by the economic slowdown of the day. Our biggest mistake was not continuing to work on this problem until now. Let's hope it's not too late. Thanks for listening.